Hello and welcome back to revise GCSEhistory.co.uk. This is the fourth and final video today in the topic of the Homesteaders, and in this video today we're going to be looking at the impact of the Transcontinental Railroad and the impact of the railways. The topic of this video today is sort of a topic in itself and sort of in a way doesn't go with the work we've been doing on the Homesteaders, but we can sort of loosely link it in to the back end of the Homesteaders topic. Alright, so let's make a start then. So the railways, a bit of background information. You may sort of be panicking at the amount of information on this slide. I would be if I were you. So this is clearly background information. And I'll just write up here. You do not need to learn all this. This is simply to give you guys a bit of background information about the Transcontinental Railroad. It will never ask you in the exam how the railroads were built and how it all began, so there's no point learning word for word everything I've put on this slide. The purpose of this slide is to give you some background information into the railway and to tell you a bit more about them so that you can take it in, be aware of it and understand it. You don't need to be able to recall it, you just need to be able to understand. Okay, so the US government paid for a survey to find possible routes from the east coast of America to the west coast of America. And then in 1861 the US Civil War begins, and the war closes off possible southern railway routes and a central one is therefore chosen. In 1862 two railroad companies are set up as a result of the Pacific Railways Act, and these two companies are the Central Pacific Railroad, which begins building in California, and the Union Pacific Railroad, which starts building in the east. So one of these starts building in the west, the Central Pacific Railroad starts building the railways in the west, and the other one, the Union Pacific Railroad, starts building in the east. And the idea behind this was that these two lines would meet up as they were built from the west to the east. So the Central Pacific Railroad from the west would eventually meet with the Union Pacific Railroad from the east in the middle, and a whole transcontinental railroad would be created. So the government gave the two railroad companies huge loans and gave them land either side of the tracks to encourage the companies to continue building. And the railroad companies need more money, so they sell land either side of the railways off cheaply to settlers. This encourages homesteaders to move on to the plains, as we've already talked about. The offer of cheap land does this and encourages people to move west. So also building through the Rocky Mountains was very difficult and conditions were harsh and incredibly dangerous, and many Chinese immigrant workers were employed to help build through the Rockies. These immigrant workers were often discriminated and treated poorly by the railroad companies. And the US government sets the 10th of May 1869 as the completion date for the Transcontinental Railroad, and the railroad companies employ Irish immigrant labourers to help speed things up in time for the completion date. In 1865 the US Civil War comes to an end and more railroad builders are brought west to speed things up in time for the completion date, which was the 10th of May 1869. The railroad builders live in shanty towns which sprang up next to the railway line, but these shanty towns were unhealthy and often violent places that contained saloons and places where lonely railroad builders without families would hire prostitutes and things like that and drink in saloons. So finally, on the 10th of May, the set completion date, the two railway lines meet at Promontory Summit in Utah. So that's the point where the lines meet together. And the Transcontinental Railroad meant that it was extremely fast to travel across the continent. Before, there was no specific railroad that did the whole journey, So to travel from east to west, I think it now took about 10 days, which was a lot quicker. So this slide here is just, let me just go over this a few more times, is background information. You do not need to learn this. You need to be aware of how the Transcontinental Railroad came about, but the stuff you need to really learn for the exam is the impact of it, not how it was built. So the impact. We're going to look at the impact of the Transcontinental Railroad in terms of positive impact, positive effects, and negative effects. Okay, let's look at positive first then. What were the positives of it? Well, let's have a look. So cities connected or close to the railways grew quickly, and some of the temporary shanty towns that the railroad builders had been living in became permanent settled towns. They became much healthier, much nicer place to live, and grew in size. Another positive effect is that trade and heavy industry profited as raw materials and finished products could now be exported by the Transcontinental Railroad easily between east and west. So there's better transport, that meant products could be exported better. And by the 1890s, this had helped the West become part of the great industrial boom or revolution taking place in the USA. That probably gives a bit more than you need to know. This final sentence you can probably do without learning, but for this point what you need to know is that the railroad that links east to west gave better transport links which helped with exporting finished goods and raw materials. Cattle ranching and the cattle industry benefited, and this led to the growth of cow towns such as the one in Abilene, as cattle could now be transported by rail all around the country. So that helps the cattle industry develop. Missed that one out previously. There was also quicker access between ports on the two coasts, and this meant there was more foreign trade, and it helped the USA's economy and helped USA as a country to become wealthier. The building of the railways also helped the West become more law-abiding, as federal law officers, judges and government officials could get there more easily. So improvement in transport meant it was more law-abiding. Hopefully this one will just be visible at the bottom of this slide here. Just squeezed it in a bit. So increasing numbers of people travelled west and settled in the West, and this meant that more people settled on the plains themselves, and this helped towns and cities to grow, and it helped to civilise the Great Plains. Alright, so far we've looked at the positive effects. The railways are all well and good, but however there were some drawbacks and there were some negative effects. Let's have a look at these. So towns that weren't close to railway lines often became deserted and business in them collapsed. So they became ghost towns. Nobody lived there because they were quite cut off in terms of transport. Some farmers felt that railway companies charged high prices for quite a poor service. And finally, a conflict was caused between white settlers and the US Army on one side and the Plains Indians on the other after 1870, and this was because really that railroads disrupted buffalo herds, and therefore they interfered with the Indians' traditional way of life. And thousands of settlers also now wanted to live on the Indians' traditional hunting grounds as they came to settle on the Great Plains. So there we are, the positive and negative effects of the Transcontinental Railroad and the railways. So quite a lot of information you need to go through, learn and absorb there, but go through it once or twice and you'll be able to learn the key points. To check you've done that, here are 4 quick questions based on all the stuff we've looked at in today's video. Pause the video here if you'd like and see if you can scribble down some answers to these questions. If not, if you're not entirely sure, carry on watching and we'll do the answers together. Okay, so question 1. Where did the East and West railways meet together? Well, they met together at Promontory Summit, and that's a bit messy that writing, let's tidy that up a bit. Summit, and that was in Utah. What did railway companies do to their land to make more money? They sold land either side of the railways to settlers. Question 3. How did cattle ranching benefit from the building of the railways? Cattle could be transported to markets, specifically markets in the north, but we'll look at cattle ranching more in a later topic. Cattle could be transported to markets more easily. And how did the railroads help the West become more... I can't talk today. Question 4. How did the railways help the West become more law-abiding? Well, they improved... I didn't want this colour again. Oh well. Improved transport. And that meant that law officials could get to the West more easily. Just squeeze that answer in there. Alright, thanks for watching this video today. That's the end of all the work on the homesteaders, although this sort of theme of the video today only loosely links to that. The next topic we're going to be looking at is the cattle industry, so head over to the website revisegcsehistory.co.uk to view videos on that, and also more revision videos similar to this on medicine through time and the American West. Thanks for watching, see you soon, and good luck with your GCSE history exam preparation.